Welcome to Magical Women. I'm your host, Connie Boyd. This is our second sequel talk with Kayla Drescher, where she provides so much insight, humor, and intelligence about SHEZAM, coping with the unexpected in live shows, and working abroad. Now don't forget to comment, to hit the like button, to subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Magical Women exists for you, and we strive to provide information about magical entertainment with some of the best, most recognized, innovative women in magic in 2020. I hope you'll enjoy Kayla's talk as much as I did. Now, you might have multiple answers to this one because you have multiple skill sets in multiple genres of magic. But what would be your worst magic disaster, and how did you overcome it, and what did you learn from it?
One of my biggest failures on stage was that I do this routine. I did it on Penn and Teller's Fool Us. It's a lovely, slightly emotional routine about a relationship. And it's one of my proudest pieces of magic that, I create. It's a torn and restored paper, but I added so much to it, and I'm really proud of it. And I was doing it at a corporate event, and this guy, it was the CEO, and guess what? He was drunk. And I'm already used to, okay, I understand you. I know how to manage you. I'm going to cut a lot of the emotion out of this routine, make it funny and fast. And in it, we tear each other's hearts like it's a relationship, and they restore. And when we tear them, I get really excited because, like, all right, is this person going to play along? Are they going to get angry with me? So then I see what happens, and he goes for it. He's angry. I was like, yes. And we get more angry, and he gets more angry. And I tear it one more time, and he goes, I'm gonna one up her. And he just takes the whole wad of paper and puts it in his mouth, and then just starts chewing it. I was like, I'm gonna need that back because I have to restore it. What do I do here? Yeah. And so to me, like, that was a disaster, and the way I handled it was good, I think. Is like I put my hand out like you do with a student who has gum, and he had to spit it into it was disgusting. But also in that like that whole show to me was a disaster. It was outside. I have a lot of paper in the show. It was raining. Lots of things got destroyed, and it was really hard to accomplish stuff. And cards obviously don't do well in rain. So, it was just an overall disaster. But yeah, from there is like, and a couple months later, it happened again. Someone else put the paper in their mouth. And because I had that first disaster and I was like, okay, I'm just going to do this. I just did the same thing. But because I was more confident in that response, it got an actual laugh from the audience. Yeah. So that was a big disaster on my part.
But were you able to restore the heart in the end with mush in your hand?
Yeah, it was gross, but yeah.
So the magic happened. It was just not pleasant.
Correct. I did not enjoy that moment.
Yeah. And that's why we have hand sanitizers.
Exactly. It's less and less now with the pandemic, but you're exactly right. Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about SHEZAM and how it started?
A couple of years ago, I had a specific week of experience where I boiled over with my frustration about how magic treats women. And it was very specific. It wasn't like a convoluted, I didn't get a booking because I'm a woman or something. It was very specific and really heartbreaking for me, where I spent a lot of time just like thinking about it. And it really kind of messed me up for a minute. And I called Carissa and said, I want to do a short-lived podcast about the experience of women in magic and interview people. And, it won't be a thing, but I want it to be impactful and important while addressing all of these issues. And I haven't seen anything like that at that point. I hadn't seen a resource or, there'd been articles or whatever, but not something so extensive. And Carissa had brought up the point that we weren't going to be able to do this in a 5-episode podcast. This was going to need to be a thing. And we spent a solid 6 months preparing it and recording and everything. And then one day we decided to launch it, and out was born SHEZAM, which was not our first choice in a name, but here we are. It's stuck. So boom. And in a sense, we say though it's the podcast that hopes to make itself obsolete. We don't want to have to do this because it's really annoying and it's a lot of work, and it has been a massive roller coaster. I've learned a lot, and we talked about subjects that are as fun as, here are the props you should not use for your character, like for your persona on stage. What does a woman's card to wallet look like? Because the answer is not pink, and because that's a product that exists. And the answer is also not a black or brown leather wallet. Maybe like you could, but that's so dramatic. You know, it's the scale of femininity, you know, super feminine, super masculine. I'm here. There are women that are here, but there are women that are here too. So, and men as well. Men span the spectrum. And so how do you make props that fit everybody? You know, D. Christopher, I think, is someone who's doing a really amazing thing where he's got a peak wallet and they just come in a million different colors. And you're like, yes, I will buy that bright blue peak wallet. That is awesome. Thank you. So we talk a lot about that. We talk a lot about how to treat your audience better. Basically, in a sense, SHEZAM is meant to be the first resource that makes magicians better people. And from there, what we've seen, obviously, because it's the magic community, the majority of our listeners are guys. And we see that conversation has really been opened up over the last 2 years, where people are going, and we get this in emails a lot, which is, I've never thought about that thing before. And I started looking at my own act and realized I do that thing. And thank you for pointing it out, because I won't do that thing anymore. And so that's the goal. The goal is we want to try to get to a point where we don't have to do this any longer, but knowing that we will for a little bit, is that we're just trying to create a better community where the people who are the biggest offenders, the people who are the worst of the worst, who are in a way not, or a little bit hopeless to change, we can at least create a community around them that doesn't support that. So they no longer will have as strong or loud of a voice that they have now, is the community around them can change and say, hey, that's not okay, and we're not going to listen to you anymore. So that's a big one. And then we just try to also help promote.
And there's always going to be good, bad, and ugly. And
for sure.
Unfortunately, and in show business, where outlandish behavior is rewarded because we're entertainers and egocentric, not everybody is sensitive and aware of what is actually correct. And sometimes that horrible outlandish behavior is what makes people famous. You know, that attitude of not caring, and that tends to be what we reward. It shouldn't be, but it is. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's exactly right, is if we change the community around those people, you know, good people will always do bad things, and bad people can do good things, and you can shift from bad to good. Again, big spectrum. It's just about your choices.
You've created an awareness, and you've done it in a very comical, intelligent, informative format, and it's just easy to listen to, and it's insightful. I think it's remarkable. It's really brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really, we've learned so much, and it's really important to us that we have these conversations. We want to normalize the idea of one saying, I made a mistake and here's what I learned, but also normalize the idea of saying, I'm not going to take that from you anymore. Mm-hmm. And I had a really great experience with a friend of mine who is a pretty prominent magician in the magic community. And these two guys were really harassing me, just being annoying and dumb. And I was handling it in my own way, but they weren't leaving. And he came over and just stood next to me and is like, is there a problem here? And the two guys, knowing he was this prominent person who was now standing by me as my ally, were like, okay, we're out, and left and never bothered me again. And in that moment, it's like, that's what we want to create, that when they see something happening or they hear something happening, that they can go, no. Right. And that's the conversation that SHEZAM has opened, and we hear it over and over again. And then if somebody listens and then they see something and then they open up a conversation with that person, then that's growing. And we're having this push forward of consciously minded people where we're just trying to make a better place.
Right. And that's a beautiful thing.
Thanks.
When you're working internationally, how did you have to adapt your shows? Do you speak in different languages? Did you just keep it visual? How did you, because I think you did it in the Champions of Magic, you did international performances. So how did it affect your performances?
So in the Champions of Magic, I've only performed so far in other English-speaking countries, so England and Scotland. And then, but I'll talk about that because there is a massive difference. And then recently, because we were slated to go perform in Mexico City, and I don't speak Spanish. I speak very little sign language. That's the only other language that I really have a small grasp on. And we did 2 full days of press in Mexico City. And so I had to learn very quickly how to say certain things. My goal is to be able to do the majority of my script when we perform in Mexico City in Spanish, so I don't have to have a translator. But what I learned is that everyone there was just impressed if I could say, "Hi, how are you?" in Spanish. They were just like, "Oh my God," because I would go, "Oh, I don't speak anything." And then I would try, and even if something was wrong, like I was counting coins and in Spanish just went 1, 2, 3, 5, nope, 4, that's it. And they just laughed and are like, "You're trying." I was like, "Thank you."
I've done a lot of international performances, and Kayla, it's the secret to your success. If you respect the country you're performing in, and you make an effort, and we would consciously make a mistake in the first 2 sentences, just because it endears you to them, and they just appreciate any effort, because not everybody does. And the second point I think that's very important for you going to a foreign country when you do have the possibility to go is if you have an interpreter, you lose control of your show, because they can go off on a tangent, and something that you would catch in 2 minutes can take 15, and the people have lost the plot and your whole intention is lost. So the more you can control the language and your performance, it's really important. That comes from experience. So yeah, it's very important.
That's a really interesting point, and one that I didn't really think of, because a couple of interpreters we worked with while just doing the press were like, because we had such a short amount of time, it was fine. But you're right, is like in the context of a theater show, oh boy, wow, yeah. So yeah, that's great, good advice, thank you. And one that once we get dates for these tours after the pandemic, then I'll be relearning that script in Spanish. But that was really interesting. That's a challenge I haven't had to have before. And I'm really thankful for the experience and the challenge. And I'm really excited to kind of meet it head on. But when we performed in the UK and Scotland, I mean,
and you speak English, but it's a different English.
I mean, I'm funny. But not at first in England. Like, it was a completely different funny. And I tried really hard to study, okay, what is funny to the people of the UK, and watched a lot of comedy and TV shows and everything. And luckily for me, I'm already very sarcastic, and I actually dial that down in a show in the US, because sarcasm tends to go over a lot of people's heads here. Not everybody, but a lot of audiences. So I have to make sure I can dial that back. And at the 3rd show on our UK tour, I clicked in like, oh, I can go full force. Yeah. I can go full force with the 3 options in my head that I usually run by to get the option that I should say in the US. And there I just went with option number 1 every time. And it was great. And I told a political joke that everybody was loving, and I recorded the reaction, and it was like, yes, this is going great. And it was really awesome. Scotland, though, I don't understand anything anyone's saying. The story I have from Scotland is I use a kid I go into the audience and call the kid, and I say, "Hi, what's your name?" And there were 2 situations. One little kid, he goes, "Kale." And I go, "Kale, like the lettuce leaf?" And he goes, "No, kale." And I was like, "I think you're saying kale." And this is all happening. This isn't a thought. This is actually happening into a microphone with the camera. Yeah. And he's like, "No, kale." And then his mom starts going, "No, kale. I'm like, kale." And they're like, "No." And I was like, "I'm saying what you're saying. I don't understand." Yeah. So that kind of went by. And then later, after the show, 3 different people from England were like, oh, his name was Kyle, his name was Kevin, his name was, nobody could agree on what his name was. So I was like, well, none of you are right. I don't understand.
Yeah.
And the other one, oh, this was my favorite moment. This little kid comes up and I go, hi, what is your name? And I'm just fully prepared to just go, okay, great. I have no idea what you said. So it's so nice to meet you. Moving on. I'm just not going to say your name the rest of the time. I go, what's your name? And this little kid just goes, bah. What is it? Bah. No. And his mom just goes, his name's Bah. And I was like, I'm not going to say that. That is a noise. That's a sound effect. I'm not. And the camera guy the camera's shaking because he's laughing. Like, there was no hope for me in Scotland. I tried so hard. And at the end of it, I was just like, I just can't. There's nothing I can do here. Like, there's no names don't make sense. Like, where am I? And I loved it. It was the most perfect country. And I would move there in a heartbeat, but I didn't understand anything anybody said.
If you've enjoyed this talk, please click on the thumbs up, comment, and let us know what you enjoy and what we can do to improve our future Magical Women Talks. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll know when new videos are posted. Stay safe, and remember, life begins at the end of your comfort zone.